We're just gonna,
Sorry, I forgot.
okay, we're gonna restart the lesson.
No.
Just kidding.
All right, nodes. Something about nodes.
Yeah, nodes. Okay, so we're gonna be in our exposure node here, and we're going to come to our tools. We were in the color wheels, and at the top of this window to the right, we're gonna see some bars, and we're gonna go to color bars. Again, I just like working in the color bars because it's a little easier for me to look at. Some people may prefer the color wheels, but these two are essentially the same thing. In bars, you have a little bit more control over what color gets added to what. But for right now, we're just worried about the exposure. So we have some tools here: lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Now, I know for a fact that I still don't know what these things fully are. That's okay. We are just going to mess with these tools, and at the bottom of each one, you're going to find these horizontal black bars. These are actually like scroll wheels. So you can click and drag left and right, and you could see that dramatically changes our image, okay? And then there's a little reset button up here in case you ever mess up and want to start over at the top right of each one. And what I'm doing here is essentially getting a feel for what these bars do, okay? That one does that, that one does that, so on and so forth. And what I'm paying attention to is this graph in the bottom right. This is going to be our waveforms. Okay, these waveforms tell us numerically what works and what doesn't work on screens. If it's things are way up here, way off up top of the graph, then it's going to be too bright and it won't look right on most screens. I'm going to go ahead and reset these. And same thing for the opposite. If I get everything super low and everything is crushed towards the bottom of the graph, everything is just going to look really, really off. Okay. So far, does that make sense to everyone? Anyone have any questions about how the graph works and why we use it, maybe? I'll just tell you anyways for fun. So we use the graph. Basically, it's because it's a guideline. It's a really great guideline for what appears well on screen and what doesn't. Most screens, this is very general, most screens will fall between these numerical values on the graph. And if it goes above this number and it goes below 0, most screens will omit it completely or it just won't look right. So we want to stay within this range as much as possible. And depending on the scene, you may want, say, a low light. You may want everything to fall between one of these lines or one of these lines. It doesn't really matter. You just go with how you feel about the project. So sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent. So let's just go ahead and expose this thing. So I'm looking at the graph. I'm noticing at the bottom, these are going to be our shadows. They're a little above the 0 line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the gamma, and this, think of this as the screen brightness. And I'm going to just lower it a little. And the way I'm doing this is I'm hovering my mouse over the scroll bar here, and I'm using the scroll wheel to make minute adjustments. You can, of course, click and drag. I have a scroll wheel and it's what I'm used to. So I'm going to use the scroll wheel here. And that gets me to a little bit more where I want to. Again, I'm paying attention to the graph and I'm looking at the screen, and we're just going to make sure that these fall within a certain range of numbers that I'm happy with. Okay. Right now, I'm not happy with the shadows still being a little too high on this graph. I want the shadows to be right on 0. That's a really good rule of thumb to adopt. If you pay attention to that, you're pretty much good in terms of the shadows. So I'm going to click one more right from the bars to log. And the key thing to remember with the difference between these color wheels, these color bars, and the log wheels is that these two over here, they're more like a machete as you're cutting through the forest. And the log wheels is more like some surgical scissors that you would cut a shape out of a leaf, right? Does that make sense? So these offer a lot more finite control. So I said I was upset about these shadows not being where I want it. I want it hovering right at 0. That's going to be a really good thing. So I'm going to come to the shadow wheel, log wheel, come to that same bar, and I'm going to scroll wheel down. And if we look at the graph, only the shadows are going to move down. And that's what we want. Okay, we all see that? Okay, and the midtones is going to be representative of the middle of the graph, highlights, high portions, and then the offset is basically the whole thing. Okay, so we got this thing somewhat exposed. We're going to move on to our saturation and contrast. Again, if you're color grading this for reals, you can get the exposure just right, but for the sake of the time we're on, we're just going to move on to the third node, saturation and contrast. Now you can manipulate this from any of these tools because the saturation and contrast are going to be located at the top or the bottom of these tools. Here's contrast up here. It's really great to go very minimalistic with the contrast. You only want a small bump. And how I'm doing this is I'm clicking and I'm dragging to the right and to the left. Okay. So it's I would advocate for very minimal. So somewhere around 1.042. This portion is solely based on how you feel the image looks as a whole as you change it. Okay. So I'm going to leave it at around there. That looks great. And then for saturation, that's going to be on the bottom over here, down here. Again, I don't know if you see my mouse, but it's going to be at the bottom right of highlights. You're going to see this thing called sat. And same thing, clicking and dragging to the left or right. And you can give it a lot of contrast or take away all the contrast. A really good rule of thumb that I've adopted is just to bring it from 50, where it was originally, and hover it around 75, as close to 75 as you can. And that should land us in the ballpark of basically what was in camera before we give it a look. Okay. And we can,
Rhenen, you said contrast. Did you mean saturation?
yes, saturation. That's saturation. Right before we did add a little bit of contrast. Going to be up here to the upper left of highlights, or yeah, up here. It's going to be at the top and bottom of every single one of these. And so this is going to get you closer to the ballpark of what the camera saw on the day. If we were looking in, since we're working in Red Raw, this is pretty much what we're going to be seeing on the day of shooting. And now we've been able to replicate it right here in post. Any questions so far? Do you need me to repeat anything? Did I go too fast?
I know you're doing basic stuff now. What about, say, for example, the bulb in that light fixture is too bright and we want to just bring down the intensity of that light?
Sure thing. Okay, so for this, we're going to be getting into a territory called parallel nodes. So if we right click or get to this drop down menu and add, you're going to see an option for a parallel mixer. And by itself, it's just a type of node that enables you to put two nodes into the same one and get a singular output. Okay. So there's a really great hotkey for this. And if I'm just going to be targeting this light fixture because it's too bright, I'm going to want to click on the exposure node, and I'm going to hold Alt or Command if you're on Mac and hit the letter P. And that'll automatically bring me a new node in parallel with the exposure into a mixer to get our singular output. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and of course we're going to label this. Now, the method that we're going to use to tackle this kind of procedure is going to be called a power window, PW for short. Does anyone have any clue as to what a power window may be? Great. A power window is just like a mask or a garbage mat tracked onto an object, so you can single out that one object out of the frame. Okay, so for this, we're going to need to scrub all the way to the beginning of our shot. Okay, it's still there. And then we're going to find where it dips out of the shot, right about there. And we're just going to keep things in mind here. So the setup for this is fairly simple. We're going to come to the right of hand side of our screen, right above this graph here. By the way, in default, you might have this graph here. That's all right. You just come to this where it says parade. That's what this is called. Drop down, and then you can go to waveform to get that same graph that I was working off of earlier. But for the power windows, we're going to notice the eye icon, and to the left is going to be our scopes, which is what we're in now. And then we're going to move one more left to keyframes. Fun, right? Keyframes. All right. So I don't know how this is going to work since I have all this going on. I think it'll be all right. So for keyframes, we're just going to have that open for now. And then what we're going to do next is notice these tools right here in the middle underneath our scene selection or clip selection. And we're going to go to the circle icon. The circle icon is going to be our windows or masks, depending on how you learn. DaVinci likes to call them windows, but we all know they're masks. And we're going to select the most appropriate type of mask for this shot. And it's going to look like the circle one, right? So we just click on the circle. It gives us a nice window, and we can manipulate it any which way, change the size. These red points are the softness. So I want it pretty soft. I'm going to try to get almost the same dimensions as the light in question. And we're going to, okay, once we got that size filed down, we're going to make sure we're still on the power window node. We're noticing that it's called number 3, node number 3. We're going to come to our keyframes, find corrector 3, okay? And we're going to click on this gray diamond, and that's going to enable the keyframing for this, okay? We're going to be at the beginning of our shot, and we're going to move it onto the light. And you'll notice as we do that, it added a keyframe for us right here. Okay, and if we're experienced in any sort of keyframing, you might know that we will just like hit the right arrow to make it go by a frame, adjust it, same thing, go by a frame. In DaVinci, we do not need to do that at all. Whoops, sorry. We don't need to do that at all. So long as we're set up here, we can remember where we clicked on the window tab. If we move one over to the right, we'll have the tracking tool. And this enables you to motion track any power window that you'd like in the frame to any object you'd like. This is a very, very powerful tool. And if done correctly, you can get some really, really amazing results. For example, if I come to the back, this opening shot for this, I have a power window right here. And as I scrub through, you can see that I have it tracked to just this area as we move back and forth, and it is as accurate of a track as you can get. I'm quite happy with that. So if we come back to our shot here. So to do this, there at the top of this tracking window, we have some controls. You can reverse track. So if you could you can start in the middle and reverse track it back to the start. You can pause it. You can forward and reverse track in one, or we can just forward track here. And for this, we're just going to forward track and just see what it does. Okay, pay attention to the window here. I'm going to click on forward track. And it's creating a multitude of points to keep that power window in the same spot. Okay, and that's pretty much done. If we scrub through the rest of our footage, that light does not appear again, but it is a perfect track onto that light, okay? However, you'll notice that there's a little bit of the power window still in our frame, okay? I'm going to use this this magic wand key at the top left of our playback window, and it's going to show us exactly what each node essentially is doing to the shot. So I'm going to click it here, and maybe hard to see, but we still have some of that in our shot, and that's going to be affecting how things go. So again, in that magic wand, we have captured only our light. However, at the end of the track, it's still right there at the edge of the frame. So what we're going to do is, thanks to these keyframes that we preemptively set up, we're going to go back and forth a few frames and figure out exactly when it leaves the shot. Boom, right there. I'm going to zoom out, and we're just going to click and drag it away from the shot entirely. That didn't work out the way I wanted to. It's okay. Command Z, Control Z, get that fixed. We're going to go right here. Okay. It leaves the shot. Go a couple more frames. Another frame out, another frame out. Okay. And that should be a good track. Okay. So the way I fixed that is I just went frame by frame as opposed to trying to move it as, you know, between a lot of frames. So now that's a pretty good track. And if we go to our magic wand, we can see how this affects the whole shot. We only have that light and some extra. Okay, we're just going to pretend like it worked. It usually works. Of course, we'll spend more time on this if we had all the time in the world. But for the sake of the demonstration, we're going to move on to what this enables you to do. So if I click back on the magic wand and I come to any of these log wheels, color bar, color wheels, any of them, and just choose something to do. For example, if I wanted to change the gain and make this light red, I can click on that dot and bring it all the way red, and that is now a somewhat red light in our shot. Okay, very powerful tool because it allows you to manipulate one object solely separate from the rest of the shot. And then if you make a very subtle adjustment, another important command here is click on your node and you do Control D. It deactivates the node until you do it again. Control D. So you could see, you can A/B the differences between what you did versus what it would look like without. And alternatively, you can add on to it as Alt D, disables and activates all nodes in your node tree. Okay. So we're going to disable that. Okay, so we've gone over base again. Don't do anything to this. We come to our exposure, make sure everything's bright in the places you want and dark in the places you want. We've gone over power windows in which you can manipulate a singular object and track it. We've gone over what a parallel node is. Color and saturation, we've already added that. And now it's time for the look. So we're in the look node, and the look node is basically going to be our grade, how we want the shot to look. This shot is currently as close as we can get to what we saw in camera from the day of shooting. And
Can I ask a question before you go too far into that?
Yeah, sure. What's up?
While you're in between things, you keep zooming in and out of the window and moving the window all over the place. What keys are you using to do that with? Because we're not seeing
okay. It's okay. I'm just using the scroll wheel. The scroll wheel goes in and out, and if I hold Control, it brings it up and down while using the scroll wheel.
How do you go sideways? Were you going sideways too, or?
No, I wasn't going sideways. I just
okay, so it's just up and down and in and out. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Is there any other questions before we move on to the look node? Okay. This is where we get to influence how the film feels as a whole, or the individual scenes. It is here that we can implement the color. For example, if we didn't want this to be such a warm shot, or too orange, we'll just come to our temperature right here in the tools, and we're going to click and drag it left or right. More to the right will make it warmer, and more to the left will make it colder. Okay, more blue and more orange. So what kind of look do we feel like this shot could benefit from? Well, that really depends on how you view the project and how you feel the project should look. Or if you're color grading for somebody else, you would get their feedback and their input on how the scene should look. So is there any input or feedback we would like to do to this shot to change it up and give it a different look?
I would like more light on his face.
More light on his face. Okay. So to do that, Grant, we're going to click on the exposure again. We're going to hold Alt and hit P again to add another parallel node. And we're going to label this face. Oops. Yeah, face light. Okay. And we are going to go to the end of our shot. I know this because I've scrubbed through it. We're going to go to the end of the shot. We're going to grab another window. We're going to slim it down, make it smaller, and we're going to put it on his face. We're going to click on the tracking tab, and we're going to reverse track this. Okay, it stopped there. That's all right. This is going to be node number 4. Same thing. We're going to click on the keyframing for it. And we are just going to go back to where it lost track right there. And we're going to move it in conjunction with his face as best as we can. Until we can see his face again. And reverse track it some more. Okay, lost it there again. We're going to go back. Okay, right there. This is where the tracking and power window system kind of fails, is that if it loses track of whatever surface you're trying to keep track of, it'll stop the track and you have to manually add the keyframes. Okay, just going frame by frame, readjusting till we can get a good look at that face again, and then we're going to continue to reverse track the shot. And that looks great. So if we go to our magic tool and scrub through, we just have that amazing face in that little window. Okay, it's a good track. Unclick the magic wand. We're going to find a place where we get a good look at his face. Now to get this tracking window off, we just need to click on another tool that isn't the tracker or the window. So I'm going to come to this dropper tool. This dropper tool is called the qualifier. And to get a little bit more light on his face, well, I'm not going to use the qualifier just yet. I'm going to come to our color bars, and I'm just going to increase the gain on his face. So if I dramatize this, you can see that this is effectively just going to be a face light. I'm going to hit reset. So we just want a little bit more brightness on his face. We don't want to go too crazy, just something that looks natural. That looks good right there. Maybe No, not quite. Again, I'm just using the scroll wheel over these bars to manipulate the things. And it's just really a matter of playing with the image, seeing what we like and what we don't like. And that's a lot more light than, and then I'm going to use Control D. That is a lot more light than what it was before. Okay, back out. And we can see it because you saw me do it, but in most situations, if you think it's a little too much, dial it back a little bit, and then it should be fine for people viewing it for the first time. Again, we can see it very clearly because we've just done it, but to someone who hasn't seen you do it, that it may be a whole nother story and they won't notice it at all. So I've brightened up his face a little, and I'm noticing that there's the skin tones on his face aren't as saturated as I wanted it to be. So we can go to the saturation and just increase it a little more to give it more to it, but that's boring. We want to figure out a way to individually manipulate just the color on his face. So that's what we're in the qualifier tool for, this little dropper. This enables you to pick any part of the frame and highlight that specific area in terms of color, hue, saturation, and luminance. That's the values that this is going to be going off of. So for example, if I go back to our look, just as an example, and I click on qualifier, and I'm going to click on our magic wand here so we can see what we're dealing with. And I'm going to just click on this light. It grays out everything except for this spot of color with the lights, because that's what it's going to be affecting. Okay. And if I click off of the magic wand and I change the value in this qualifier, you can see it's only affecting that area. Okay. Do we see that? Okay. And within this, you can click on another spot, show you more, click on another spot, and everything you can see is what it's going to be affecting, everything back here. So yeah, this is a really good qualifier because it's mainly targeting the background and not the foreground. And we can say, I want this to be all like that, but then he's still somewhat normal. It's really fun to mess around with. So, and the way to learn all this stuff is really just to mess around with it. Okay, so we're going to come back to our face light, click on our magic wand, and I just want his face. I'm zooming in and I'm scrolling up with control, and I'm just going to click around until I can get really clean pass of just his skin. Nope, that's not what we want. It's a really tight window anyways, so we would do this in another example, like this one over here. This is an example of using a qualifier just to grab skin tones. And if I click on the qualifier node and I Control D, you can see what it looks like without and with. It's just, I added some more color just so his skin can have a little bit more liveliness to it. And that's going to be our goal with this shot over here, is we're going to find the best shot we can, make sure we're on that. And since this is fairly dark, we want to come to offset and just offset the color towards the red, orange direction, just to give it a little bit more life into it. And it's me clicking and dragging this little dot in a direction until I feel happy with it. And that's not bad for the whole duration of the shot. It's a little more obvious up here, but for the sake, you would have much more time working with it if you're doing it. But hopefully we understand how that works, and I could answer questions afterwards if we'd like. Okay, on to the look. So again, this is going to be influencing the scene in a dramatic way to either change the feel of it entirely or just give it the color grade you want. So far, this has all been in camera. Fortunately for this set in particular, we had a lot of colored lights, so we're going to get a lot of styles shining through just the camera. So I would influence this very little. So I can make it much warmer so that by the end it looks something like this. I can make it much cooler, and I could add some green or magenta with the tint tool right next to it and make it more green. And you could see how this affects the entirety of the shot. And if you really want to change up the overall thing, look of it in a dramatic way, that's when you can start using these color wheels or the log wheels and click and drag in a direction until you get something that you like. Highlights will affect all the bright spots. Offset will affect the entire image. Midtones will affect everything that would look not too bright, but also not too dark. Very subtle. And then shadows would affect all the shadows of the dark spots of the image. So if we went something like this, went to the highlights, accentuated that light, come to our midtones, make it a little cooler, give it a purple offset, and see what this does. Warm that up. This is all just by feel and how you want your overall image to look. So what I just did is very stylized, leaning into one color and the other color kind of coming in as a support. It is also important to note that you may want to come back to your scopes to the right of keyframes and pay attention to what these colors are doing to your image. As you can see, as I change the tint, it adds a lot more blue and red as opposed to not having it. Same thing with temperature, it'll add a lot more red or a lot more blue. But you can do this part mostly by eye. And it's important for the look to only affect color. If you want to affect your brightness, you want to make sure you stay organized and come back to your exposure and change up the brightness. Okay. And I know that was a lot of information, but if you put in the time to mess with everything and figure out what works for you, what kind of looks you like, and how you would go about to achieve them, you would end up with something that you're happy with. And that's overall what I want you guys to take away from this, is that it's okay to experiment. And if you're happy with the work that you did to make a shot work, then that's all that matters. Okay. And that covers the basics and some of the more advanced techniques of how to color in DaVinci Resolve. Hopefully you guys got some, were able to take some stuff away from this. Thank you for having me.
Can I
Any
ask
questions?
Yeah, can I ask some questions as well as everyone else? So, one of the things that I often do in Final Cut, and I think Tim does in Premiere, is if you get the color and saturation and everything just the way you like it, you can copy that and paste it to another clip.
Yes.
And I'm sure you can do that in DaVinci, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about where you have motion tracking? If you copy it, does that not carry through so that, or do you have to delete that part of it, or?
Okay, so if we got done with this shot, okay, we have a power window tracker on here. We have a qualifier tracker on here that tracks his face. And we have a look, we have the saturation and exposure. If I want these exact nodes, if I want to copy this look and make sure it looks the exact same on the next scene, I'm going to click on that next scene. And if you have a mouse, I have no idea what this would be if on a Mac, if you didn't have a mouse or if you don't have a scroll wheel, but you would middle mouse click in the scroll wheel on the one you want to copy, and it would auto apply everything that you did. Now, in terms of the tracking windows, in terms of the tracking windows, the tracking data does not go through. However, where you placed the window itself will. So in this instance, I would just Control or Command D and disable that so that it doesn't affect my shot. But I still want these qualifiers to go through. So I still want those skin tones to be affected by this. So I put a qualifier and a tracking window in here. I would come to, if I was out of it, I would come to the window and just click on the thing again, and it would disable it. Okay. And you could see what that does to the whole image. It's going to affect here, and then I would need to adjust this, come back to the qualifier, make sure it is just hitting these specific skin tones. Maybe I'd want to throw the window back in there and make sure it's just hitting this area that I want it to affect. And okay, we're at the beginning, and then we would retrack it. Okay, unclick our magic wand, and you can see what that does to our shot here. So it's very, very simple when it comes to copying and pasting the grade you want onto another one. For example,
it was simple, but I didn't follow it. Could you please explain how you moved it again?
Okay, so we click on the next clip. We're done with this clip. We want to make sure that this look transfers over to the next one and it looks the exact same. I'm going to go to the next clip, and with the middle mouse wheel, I'm going to click that in over the previous clip or whatever I want it to copy. So I can middle mouse click it and it'll automatically apply whatever I did to that last one.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And again, if I didn't want this and I wanted it to imitate this one over here, I'm going to click on middle mouse click in or scroll wheel click in, and it'll copy that one. But again, the tracking windows that I put on do transfer, but the tracking data does not. So you would have to go in and change what the tracking data did. I can't really see it because of the zoom controls, but up here, there are some settings like where the file is, and you can click on color, and you can apply grade from one clip prior, apply grade from 2 clips prior, and figure out the hotkeys. I work off of PC, and I'm accustomed to having a mouse with the scroll wheel, and the quick button for me to press is the middle mouse click. Another tool, a very useful tool that I thought of is being able to split screen and color match to the exact same thing. For example, not all the time will you be able to apply the grade and it goes through flawlessly. So to do that, I would click on the one I want it from. I'm going to right click. I'm going to hit grab still, and that's going to bring a still that you grab from this image to this gallery up here in the top left. And it's right here. Okay. It'll always bring the split screen from the last still you grabbed. So if I go to this next clip and I wanted to match it up, I'm going to click on image wipe, and that'll make it so you can compare both scenes at the same time and grade it accordingly so it matches up. And the way I'm bringing this across is I'm just clicking and dragging across the screen. Or we can do it this way. with these tools up here. Left to right, up, down, diagonally, opacity. I don't know what that one does, but yeah. Any other questions? It's a lot of information to pack all in one, so it's okay if you ask a question about what we already went over, I can clarify it.
If they don't have questions about DaVinci, what about color correcting? Why is color correcting such an important step in your post-production?
Color correction is such an important step in our post-production workflow because it often livens up the footage that you shot. It often saves projects because things might not have worked out if you use the image right out of the camera. If you're using a film camera, often it'll shoot in a log form or a raw form, which will not give you any color at all, and you need to color it. Of course, there are LUTs that you can apply to things, and a LUT is just an overall thing, like filter you could put on your image. However, that's not as accurate and not as sufficient as doing it in DaVinci with all these finite tools that you can really manipulate anything you would like and change the image that you're trying to portray dramatically. For example, there was an instance in which I was a part of a set, and we went till late at night, but we still have one shot that we forgot to get during sunset, and it's already late at night. The sun's already down. So what we did is we got a really bright light, we shined it through a window, and we faked it. And you might say that won't work. A bright white light is not the same as the sunlight. Well, it is the same. It'll fool the eye if we can bring it into DaVinci, target those specific lights, and make it look like the sun. This is a very, very powerful tool. We've demonstrated this here with this power window, how we can dramatically change the warmth of the light and how it looks on screen. And we as the editors know what's going on. We can see what's happening only because we know it's there, because we put it there. Okay. But if your audience is watching it for the first time, they will not know that bright light was not actually the sun. If you take your time and you experiment.
Maybe use On the Couch as an example. How much did the color grading process affect On the Couch?
On the Couch was a feature film that Grant shot over 2 summers ago, I believe. And what had happened there is that our lighting on set was from the top down, not very directional, and it was in one instance described as flat. Through color grading with DaVinci, we were able to pick and choose where we wanted our contrast to be and accentuate the shadows and really change the look by adding a little bit more color to each shot and making it more quote unquote cinematic. Now, in that example, it wasn't very easy to do. It was a lot of motion tracked masks. It was a lot of qualifiers. It was a lot of the tools were used here. We had the circle windows, the square windows tracking an entire wall just to change the exposure of it to give it more depth. We had a gradient mask on it. there's so many tools at your disposal in DaVinci. Mind you, this is the free version of DaVinci. There are so many tools available to you to dramatically change what you want out of a shot, that you might not have thought was good at first, but after some elbow grease, you can churn out a product that you are happy with. So in that instance, there was a lot of tracking, messing with the exposures of walls, faces, making sure everything, we essentially relit the entire scenes shot by shot in DaVinci.
Yeah. So Diana, who is not a film person, but her reaction when she saw the rough cut of On the Couch was, she said it looked like a soap opera, like you'd see on television. And then afterwards, she said, I don't know what happened, but suddenly it looked like a movie. And it was all the work that you and Chris put into the color that gave it the cinematic look. So it can, drastically transform the look of your film or your project. Other questions for Rhenen about DaVinci or coloring or the process?
What's the biggest advantage of DaVinci, I guess, over just Premiere and Final Cut? I know probably, I'm guessing the automated tracking doesn't exist in those other programs. Are there other things that puts us, way above those programs when it comes to coloring?
When it comes to coloring specifically, DaVinci was initially a tool specifically designed for color grading. It is still the industry standard for most big budget Hollywood films, all of them, I should say. Big brands like Sony, Panasonic, Fox, 21st Century, all the big names, they swear by DaVinci Resolve simply because of the amount of tools, the sheer amount of tools you have at your disposal to really, really pinpoint exactly what you want to change and change it. Things like the trackers do exist in these other programs. However, it does not come without a fee. In DaVinci, you could download the free version and get a really, really great accurate motion tracker for free.
Yeah. The other thing too is this is free that you can use on your computer at home, but professional colorists use the same software, but instead of a keyboard and a mouse, they have a color board, and instead of using your mouse to turn the wheels or whatever, that they actually have a color board that does it. And
so these wheels here would not only be digital, but physical wheels that you can manipulate. And same thing with all these tools over here.
And so they get quite fast at using the tools, and it's a very hands-on process. It's really cool to watch a professional colorist color. So
yeah,
and it's one of these things where you just spend hours and hours learning and doing to get good at it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the difference between those two.
And yeah, again, hopefully everyone here was able to take away something from the lesson. I'm not the greatest presenter when it comes to this, and it's a lot of information to unpack. But again, I cannot stress that if you have the opportunity to work on a project for yourself and really figure things out in DaVinci and get a feel for it, I highly encourage that.
So Rhenen, Celeste asked, do you use your keyboard and mouse, or do you use the coloring board?
I use my keyboard and mouse.
The coloring board, the software is pretty reasonable. I mean, it's free if you want, but you can get the paid version and it's still not that bad. you buy the coloring board, and I don't, does anyone know what it costs? It's something like $30,000-$40,000.
Yeah, as much as a
Yep.
car.
Yeah.
There's like cheaper versions, right? There's different levels, I think.
Yeah. So for what you're going to do, you'd probably use your keyboard and mouse from on your computer. But if this is what you're going to do for a living, that's when you invest in the board.
Yes. Learning how to color grade in DaVinci, especially for if you're planning on getting into color grading as a long-term career goal, it is as valuable as a PhD degree to say that you have training and know how to color in DaVinci. That is how important it can be. Okay. Not to say that color grading in other projects is worse. You can certainly achieve the same things, but there may not be as many simple answers to those things in those programs compared to DaVinci.
By the way,
Absolutely.
if you get or develop a level of expertise in any one area of filmmaking, you can basically have all the work you need. A colorist, for example, can work every day of the week just coloring. If you are a Steadicam operator, you can get all the work you need, or a drone operator, or an editor. I mean, you can do one of these, and so you can really perfect the art. And then there are lots of jobs out there for those who are particularly good or have a passion for one aspect of filmmaking.
That's what's really amazing about filmmaking, is that you can hyper focus in one area. It's almost not good to be a master, what is it? A master in none, right? Like, everything, you truly aren't an expert in one area. So it's going to be one of those things that it's excellent to be able to do a lot of things, but just know that there's always going to be one area that you're going to focus in and prefer, right?
But it's also one of those things where it's good to know about it, all of it. You might not be great at it, but it's good to know all the different aspects of filmmaking.
Absolutely. You should know some level of anything, just so that when you're working with an expert, you don't sound dumb, right? Like you should be able to know basic terms and understand the concept, instead of like just saying, hey, make this look good, Rhenen. Like that doesn't really give him information. You should be able to be like, oh, I want more contrast. I want everything to feel cooler. Just knowing the terms and elements of all of the different areas, knowing how sound works. That's why being able to take these classes and go, you also learn which areas you hate or you aren't good in, that maybe you need to focus in. And that's where you learn, like, okay, coloring maybe isn't my expertise, but guess what? I made a connection with Rhenen, and now I know the person to go to when I need something colored.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, there are some jobs that I just don't want to take the time to do. And I know that there are people who are better than I. And so I didn't color on the couch, and I'm not going to color our next feature film, Do Not Disturb. We're hiring Rhenen and Chris to do that. So I love doing the audio mix, and so I will do a lot of that. But, that's something a lot of people will do, is hire someone to, mix audio, for example. So. Any other questions for Rhenen?
Hey, Rhenen, I tried to cover up, remember that white dot on the chessboard and institution? Is he there?
Yeah, Rhenen, can you hear?
Yes. I was muted.
I'm muted. Okay. Remember that white dot on the chessboard?
Yes.
So I tried to follow a YouTube video to get rid of that dang thing, and then it told me I needed to have the paid version. Is that kind of what you ran into too?
Yes, there is a very roundabout way that you can go about it, in which that you come to the edit tool. You can make a duplicate of the same clip above it and kind of punch into a spot where it is the the same, and then get it to mask over it. But yeah, to the extent of compositing, I'm not an expert at all when in DaVinci.
But you can also do that in Premiere. So in On the Couch, for example, Tim kept saying, "Hey, I hate seeing those outlets on the wall." So I took a section of the wall right beside it and layered it over the top of an outlet, and suddenly the outlet was gone.
Yes.
However, when you do something like that, sometimes you need to tell the colorist, because when Chris and Rhenen started working on the Couch, suddenly there were these weird squares that they didn't know, why they were there.
Yeah, a good example is in this shot. This is a 2-shot of Sophie and Sophie. This is done in 2 different shots entirely. So when I go to manipulate the first shot of Sophie and I want to do that, it only manipulates half of it. I need to be able to know that ahead of time so I can go ahead and do the exact same thing to the other one.
Great example.
The
Celeste
reason
asked,
I could have done it in Premiere, but I'd already turned it over for coloring and it's kind of frozen at that point is the problem we ran into.
yeah. Celeste asks a question: what is the most surprisingly useful tool in DaVinci Resolve?
Hotkeys. Hotkeys and labeling. It's very, very minute. And I'm not doing a very good job of it, but hotkeys, and labels. Just because when you get to especially complicated stuff and you're doing, let's see, stuff like this, this has a lot going on to it, because this has a camera motion in the shot. And I needed a way to make sure all my stuff stays exactly where it's at while not affecting all the other stuff. So if you get really good at just labeling everything, you can know exactly where things are and what is changing. And if you're getting really good at hotkeys, you can vastly accelerate your workflow. But a more obvious answer would be the automatic tracking tool. It saves the day every single time.
I was muted. Any other questions? Okay, well, hey, thanks so much, Rhenen. Really appreciate it. It's good to know what the industry standard is and how to get started. I think, Rhenen, you'd recommend that just playing with it, right? Just start practicing. And a lot of times you can just experiment and start to learn the program, and then you or YouTube videos can be a nice resource to figure things out. But if you want to color yourself or color your own projects, I highly recommend DaVinci.
Yeah,
It's
definitely
free.
looks important to do, like if you want to make it look professional.
Can you say that again, Robert? I didn't hear.
It definitely makes it like definitely a good thing to like do if you're gonna make it look professional in the end.
Totally agree.
Now everyone say one thing they learned. I'm kidding, don't.
I'm gonna stop recording.